Let's explain what Twitch Tales is about then. So this is a weekly episodic D&D adventure where I am in charge of the game and you guys are in charge of the character. So you are playing collectively. You are collectively hive mind making the decisions for a dwarf ranger called Apis Hive. Apis is a level 4 ranger, a horizon walker. They are still yet to sort of work out what horizon walker means, but they know it has something to do with interplanar travel. And most recently, Apis has found themselves in a frontier town called Shadridge, built on the shady part of a mountain ridge near a large forest called the Fair Woods. Upon going into town, Apis discovered that the local apiarist, the local mead maker, Jack Creed, had been killed, murdered by goblins, and Apis hunted them down, dispatched the goblins, got back Jack's stolen goods, and brought it back to town. Apis then, upon arriving back in town, realised that they were in the middle of an investigation with the local law enforcement called the Knights of Kavosna, and wanting to avoid any sort of awkward questions about why they had Jack Creed's stolen goods and blood on their hands, Apis decided in the moment to lie to the Knights of Kavosna and tell them that they were an undercover knight. In doing so, they managed to avoid any questions for now, and then they pursued the goblins some more and and dispatched even more of them. And then, upon doing so, they discovered that there were some elves living nearby in the woods, in a series of 4 small sister towns called the Four Sisters. And these elvish towns had also been attacked by the goblins. So Apis, being the kind person that they are, volunteered to help rebuild these towns and to help them with their upcoming harvest, now that a few people had been killed by goblins and were unable to harvest these magical flowers. So they did so. They stuck around long enough to help them out with that, leveled up once or twice, and then they made their way back to Shadridge. And as they arrived back in Shadridge, they realised that some odd things were happening around town over the last few days. In the week that Apis had been gone into the woods, there had been some old people getting sick and passing away, getting really weak in the last few days before death. And investigating this, it was quickly uncovered that it was the work of a necromancer using shadows to sap and leech people's strength away until they died. And then, upon dying, their shadow themselves, the shadow of the victim, would also rise to be a new shadow. And so the shadow army was growing in town. Thankfully, it was very small in number by the time Apis worked out what was going on, tracked it down to the necromancer that was responsible, and defeated the shadows and drove the necromancer Sally out of town. Apis tried to follow Sally into the woods with a bit of a posse in tow, and were unsuccessful in tracking them too far, and so they decided to go back to town and take some downtime to sort of help the town recover and level up. Upon leveling up, Apis was granted some bone dice from a mysterious benefactor, a fey creature, cherub-like in appearance and fey-like in behaviour. They were told that these dice had divining qualities to them, and upon asking it a sort of question, it was likely that these dice could give you an answer. But you don't know what the exact rules of using these dice are, or whether it costs you anything to use. Then, after a few days of downtime, the local law enforcement eventually, by this point, they've worked out that we were lying and we're not actually a law enforcer. But they got in touch and said, "Hey, we trust you again now. You've kind of earned our trust back. Could you do an errand for us? Head over towards the nearest town of Fondurg and see why their letters and mail and supplies haven't been getting through." And when we went on this little journey, we got ambushed by bandits. And we quickly discovered, of course, this is why the supplies have not been getting through, because there's bandits on the way. But there was another layer to it. Apparently these bandits were working against their better judgment. They were not willing participants in this banditry. They were actually working for a manticore that was forcing them to work under pain of death. And so they banded up with Apis and defeated this manticore, brought its dead body and all of its belongings back to the town of Shadridge, and had it skinned and boned and placed on display at the local menagerie that is just being built. Over the last couple of days, Apis has been helping to build and populate this menagerie as a temple to the god of beasts and hunting by going out into the forest and collecting various animals, badgers and rabbits and birds, oh my. And then yesterday, wanting something a little more exciting for the menagerie, Apis went out one last time to try and find something bigger, maybe an owlbear or a displacer beast. And hedgehogs, of course, don't forget the hedgehogs. Apis went out, they discovered a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, and being exceptionally rare and legendary creatures, Apis was very clever in how they persuaded it to come back with them to the menagerie to become a draw for the town of Shadridge. And so that's where we're going to pick up today.